So we are live. So hello everyone. My name is Muskan Agarwal and welcome back to Geeks for Geeks. Today we are yet here with another webinar. So before I add my guest to the stream and give a brief introduction about what the webinar is going to be about, just give me a thumbs up in the comment section if I'm perfectly visible and audible. So there are no technical glitches in this entire webinar. You can just give me a thumbs up in the comment section and then I will start with the webinar. The webinar is going to be a really interesting one and you are going to learn a lot. So I'll suggest all of you who are watching this webinar stay till the end of the webinar. Right. So yes, thank you Adarsh for confirming. Others can also send a thumbs up in the comment section and also invite your friends if possible. Right. Okay, thank you Vamsi for giving a thumbs up. We'll just wait for another 1 minute so that more people can join the webinar. We have Pushp Singh with us today. He's going to tell us about understanding JavaScript functions and more about JavaScript, and we are going to learn a lot from him. So yes, stay tuned for the webinar. It is going to be a really interesting one. I'll add him to the stream in another 1 minute. Thank you, Vishal. Thank you, Anuradha. Right, I think we can add Pushp to the stream.
Hi
Hi,
Muskan, how
Pushp.
are
How
you?
are you? I am doing good. How are you?
Yeah, doing great. Thank you. Thank you for asking, and thanks for inviting me for this webinar. And I believe this is a great stage and opportunity to showcase technical stuff to the people out there, and especially to the engineer working professional. So, yep.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. Thank you for coming to Geeks for Geeks and taking this webinar. It's our pleasure. I can already see a lot of students have joined. Like it's been just not even 5 minutes the webinar has started, and people are really excited in the comment section. So I hope it goes really well. So before we start with JavaScript functions and you to take forward the webinar, can you give us a brief introduction about yourself so that the audience connects with you better?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think giving introduction is one of the crucial part of starting any webinar. At least the audience will I mean, what I would say, like the audience will get a better clarity, like who is giving the webinar and how he has been
Yes.
doing the stuff. So yeah, myself Pushp Singh, and I'm working as web engineer for the company Condé Nast, and moreover, I'm a tech evangelist. I keep contributing to open source. Even I act as an interviewer for most of the other organizations as a kind of helping them as a kind of goodwill to take mock interviews. Even I help others, especially the engineers or working professional, learn code, because I believe in today's world everyone knows to write code, but there are very few who actually knows how to write code, the
Yeah.
good code. This is the thing I have observed. And second thing
Hmm.
is, in current date, JavaScript, one of the most widely used language throughout the companies, especially the product companies, are using JavaScript. Previously, we had a
Right.
Java where it was getting used widely, and now JavaScript is preceding the Java, and it is one of the language which is used everywhere. And knowing JavaScript is the demand of the market at this point of time. So I thought of, okay, let's spare some of my time and introduce the mostly asked interview questions in JavaScript, where most of the candidate get stuck.
Right. I think that's a really good thing that you're doing, helping out the student community that is out there. And even like I'm also in my fourth year, so even I will sit back and watch the whole webinar really carefully. And I hope all the students who have joined it, they will, by the end of the webinar, they will learn a lot. Right. So we can start with the webinar. I'll take a leave and you can carry on from here on. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Muskan. So yes, I mean, this webinar is of 1 hour duration, and I would be breaking this webinar into two different segment, I would say, topics. So the first topic I would be discussing about the functions, how JavaScript function works behind the scene. So I believe most of you might have written or continuously writing JavaScript function, like function and doing all the stuff and executing the function, and you are getting the result. But have you ever thought, when you have written the function and when you have invoked the function? Invoke the function means when you are calling that function. So what happens behind the JavaScript engine, or I would say browser? For now, just listen. like th- I'm talking about JavaScript engine, but I'll talk more about what is JavaScript engine. But as a normal engineer, have we ever thought, once we have executed any function, how that function is giving a result, or what is exactly happening behind the scene? So yes, today I would be going to show you the live demo as well as some theoretical part, how exactly a function runs behind the scene, that is inside the browser, and the JavaScript engine is the thing which do all the stuff. This would be the first part of my segment of this webinar. The second segment is the event loop. This is one of the most widely asked interview question, and most of the candidate goes into a rabbit hole while answering this question. The reason might be they are not completely aware of what is event loop, or they might be lagging the basics, like how event loop works, or something like what exactly the event loop. Even the question itself is a confusing. So I would be covering this into my second segment of this webinar. So yep, starting my first segment, and I would be sharing my screen. So please let me know whether my screen is visible. All right, so I have written something here, and if it is visible for everyone, please let me know using thumbs up so that I can start further stuff. All right, so I got a comment like it is visible. Fine. So I'm gonna to write one small function which everyone write in their day-to-day life, or day-to-day their programming life. So the very first thing I would be writing, say for example, function get city name. And yes, obviously, you might be thinking why I'm writing into a developer console and why I'm not using IDE or some available online IDE. So I would say, if you prefer writing your coding stuff into this Google Developer Console, it will give you more flexibility to understand what you write, because here you won't be getting more of the intelligence like suggestions. This provides a suggestion to anything, but most of the time you have to write manually. So writing a code manually will give you more practice to understand what you are writing. So I'm creating a variable, say for example a city, and I'll write, say for example I'm writing a Bhopal, and I'm doing console.log, and I'm just printing this city. This is very easy, right? And I'm just zooming this screen so that it would be visible for everyone. And I'm copying this function, and I'm writing another function called state, and I'm writing state. This is very basic. You might be thinking like, what I'm doing," but let me tell you what exactly I want to show you. And I would say name is equals to, right? Now I'll invoke this function here, and I'll invoke this function here. Now you might be thinking like, hey, why I'm invoking this function here? Generally, how you used to do, or the people used to do, you have written this function and then you would be invoking the function at the end, something like this, if I'm not wrong. So this is a normal way the engineers do, or do. But what I have done, instead of invoking the function here, so the word I'm using, invoking means calling a function. All right. So this is called a function declaration. You are declaring a function. Declaration generally contains a function name and the structure of the function or the body. Invoking a function means you are calling a function. So coming to the point, now you would be asking like why I'm invoking this function even before it is declared. So if you are aware of hoisting, or if you have the term hoisting, so this has to be related to the hoisting. So if you have a basic understanding of hoisting, you would be knowing, or you would be comfortable like this is one of the way of doing. And if you are not aware of hoisting, I would be covering it into some other session, but for timing, just for your reference, this is example of hoisting or how hoisting work. But yeah, hoisting is not part of this session. So yeah, I'm just trying to show you this. So well, I have written this function. Now I'll just put this function here. Um, so this is a function we have written. And now when you execute this function, now do console log here, and I'll show you. All right. Okay, some typo error is here. So let's see where is the typo error. This is console, and here I made a mistake. I have not written log. All right. Now see, if you execute this function, this will output you this variable. This will output you this the function. This function got called, and it is just displaying the result. Now coming to our main topic, have you ever wondered how these results are appear onto the console, or how these functions are getting executed? So now coming to our draw board, and I want to show you, whenever any function is called, two things happen. What is the two thing which will happen? Let me show you. Whenever we run a function, a global execution context is created. If you are thinking what is a global execution context, so think global execution context as a box or a container which contains all the functions. I would say the JavaScript function where all the JavaScript function run. So global execution context is a part of JavaScript engine, and JavaScript engine is a part of a browser. So whenever we run any JavaScript application, the JavaScript application runs inside a global execution context. And the global execution context you can think is as a container. So the when you run this program, a global execution context will get created. Now once global execution context is created, so there happens two things. Please bear with my drawing. So first a memory is created. I would say memory creation happens, and second thing is code execution happens. Code execution. So these two things happens in a global execution context or when you run a JavaScript program. Okay, so let me just drag it here. So memory allocation and code execution. So if you see my right side here, my first variable is name. So it memory allocation, all the variables would be stored. So if you see here, so my first variable is name. Name will be stored. Okay. And second variable is a get city name. So get city name will also get stored here. So for you, get city name is a function, but actually this is also a variable according to JavaScript engine. So JavaScript engine will treat it as a initial variable. So get city name. Likewise, get state name will also get stored. Get state name. All right. So you see the variable to the right side, the my snippet at the right side, name, it will be stored in a memory creation phase, or it will get initialized there. Get city name and get state name. Now what would be the initial value of name? So whenever a variable is inserted inside a global execution context and the memory is allocated to it, the initial value to a variable is undefined. So the initial value will be undefined to this variable, and the initial value to this function, let me create, make it some good line, something like this. Okay. And the initial value which we assign to a function is the function structure. So the whole function, if you see get city name, the whole function will be copied inside this. So the whole function will be inside this. So there is, and if you are aware of hoisting, again I'm saying, like if you are aware of hoisting, you might be aware like why this is happening. For a variable, undefined will be initialized. For a function, the whole function structure or the function code will get copied. So this happens in a memory creation phase where the variable is initialized with undefined and function is initialized with the function structure, or the whole structure of function is copied. Now in code execution, what happens? Now if you see this snippet, so now in code execution, all the code will run line by line. You know JavaScript is a synchronous and single threaded language. So what happens, everything in a JavaScript runs in a single thread, and even it runs sequentially, I mean one by one or line by line. So the very first thing, var name will get into a code execution phase, because now we already have initialized a memory for each variable. And in order to assign any value to a variable, the very first thing is done is to allocate a memory, because the value are always stored in a memory. So the very first thing JavaScript does is memory allocation. Until and unless memory is not allocated, your program will not execute. Because once the program start execution, it will start inserting the values, and the value will get inserted into the allocated memory. Just understand, like example, like nowadays a builder are creating apartments, and they are creating a multiple of flats. So until and unless the flat is not created or the flat is not constructed, the family will won't be able to come and live in. So for that, the flat must be constructed or a house must be constructed. So house is a space, and once the house is constructed, the family member can start, and they can come and start living. So you can relate this live example to this JavaScript memory creation. So memory is a kind of a house or the space which we have, and once you got the space, then you can just ask the value to come and reside. All right. So now coming to this snippet, which is right side. So we have the initial value, which is var name. So what happens, the var name will start executing here. Okay. So it will come something like this inside a code execution phase. Okay. So now once the variable will start executing, it will see like, hey, name is already uh, residing here. I mean, name is already initialized. Let just store the value of name to the actual name which is inside my memory. So what will happen, this variable name, I mean the value will be assigned to this, and this line of code will get executed. So if you see, the variable name came because the first line of code is name variable. So name variable will be executed, and once it will see like we have the value, so the value will get assigned to the actual name. And once the value is assigned, your code, I mean your line number one will get executed, and it will be removed from your code execution phase. So it will be removed from code execution phase. Now it will come to this line, get city name, which is a function. So if you are aware of call stack, if you are not aware of call stack, I would be taking this call stack segment in the next topic, which I would be covering. So I'll tell you, call stack is a container which contains all the function which need to be executed. So don't worry about if you are not understanding call stack as of now. I just explained the call stack because we need a call stack here, but I'll be explaining the call stack in detail in the next topic. So just for your information, when get city name function is executed, or when the control will come to this function, then what will happen? It will see like, hey, where is get city name? It will find like, oh, the get city name is here. So once it will find like get city name is declared, it will create a execution context. So execution context will be created inside the code execution block, and it will have again two phase, which is a memory creation phase, which is a memory creation phase, and this is a code execution phase, the same as the global. So you see, the bigger box or the bigger container has a memory creation phase and code execution, which is a global context. So this one is a global execution context, which is a bigger box. All right. And whenever any function is executed, so every function has their own execution context, which is a local execution context. So now you would be thinking like, hey, we have a global execution context, then why we need a local execution context? So you can think a global execution context is the parent container where all functions execute. All right. If you have a multiple functions, so every function will have their own execution context. So this global execution context will get created automatically when a JavaScript function is running. When I say a JavaScript function, it means the actual function which I have written here, like the whole, when you run whole. So this is treated as a main function, or I would say this is a main thread. Basically we talk everything in a term of thread. So when you run this function, actually a main thread is running, which is a main JavaScript thread is running. So when a main JavaScript thread runs, a global execution is created, and inside a main thread you are having this function, you are having this function, you can have a multiple function. So every function will have their own execution context, right? So here, if we see get city name, this is a function. So it will create its own execution context here, and it will do the same thing as we have done for the global execution context. Now you can see a variable called city. So here we will have a city, because you can see a variable city, and then it will see like, here now we don't have anything to execute in terms of function. So the memory will initialized as undefined for this city. uh, I think I can make this diagram little bit bigger, otherwise a confusion will be created. So for time being, just this, I mean, bear with me, and you can think this city will be initialized as undefined in a memory space, right? And now when the code will start executing, it will copy the whole, this whole variable in a code execution, just like here. So it will copy everything in a code execution phase. It will comes like this. And when it will come in a code execution phase, it's like, hey, city is there and city is already in the memory. So just assign the value Bhopal to the undefined. So now what will happen? This value will be assigned to the city variable, and this line will get deleted because this code will get executed. So once the code get executed, it will be removed from the execution context. So just for your information, whenever you are running a function or whenever a variable is getting executed, once their execution is over, they will popped out of the calls, and they are popped out of your execution context. Okay. So now variable, this function is executed, and this variable will get executed. It will assign a value to the city and it will get popped up. Now the control will come to the get city name. So you would be also asking, now get city name is done, like the execution of get city name, this function is done. So what will happen to this execution context? As I mentioned, whenever any variable or any function execution is over, that function or variable is popped out. So now the work of get city name is done. I mean, it has done the execution. So what will happen? The whole of the execution context will be popped out or get deleted from the actual code execution phase. So this is a code execution phase, and my program is still running because my function get city name is over, but still get city name is left. So once this function is done, it will say like, hey, we have another function called get city name. So it will again come to this part, and again it will create the same um, it will create a same execution context, which will have a memory here. I mean, it will have a memory phase, and it will have a code execution phase similarly to the previous one. And it will again do for the state, and like it will have a state here, and it will be think what would be the initial value of the state. If it is here, I might not be seeing your comment, but let me know what would be the initial value of the state variable here. I'm not writing the initial value, so meanwhile you can put in the comment or the chat box, and I'm just going to the next part, which is a code execution phase. So let me know what would be the value of state here, this variable value, what would be the value of this initial value of this variable during the memory creation phase. So once memory is created, we would be going to inside the function, okay, the function execution. So in function execution, the whole line will get copied, and it will get copied. And if you have mentioned undefined during memory creation phase, correct. So initial value would be undefined. And now when this variable or this line will be executed, which is var state is equals to mp, that will get mapped to the actual state variable, and this will be removed. So this will happen in memory creation phase. Okay, so now the actual value of the state is assigned while a memory creation, and now the console log will come into the picture. So i- if you have seen what I have talked throughout this phase is memory creation and the code execution. Okay, before going to the conclusion, once the function get city state is executed, this whole execution context, and also just to note, this is a execution context which is a local execution context if you see this, and the bigger box which you see is a global execution context. So don't get confused between the execution context and a global execution context. Generally, we say a execution context, and execution context is local, or it has a limited scope, or it has a limited accessibility. Global execution context has a wider scope, and it has a wider accessibility. Even just by the name, you can also relate global. Even we say a global variable, it means it can be accessed throughout the program. So likewise, we have a global execution context and a execution context. So you can think, if someone says a execution context, it means you can relate it as a local execution context which has a limited accessibility, and it can have the accessibility in a limited manner, but for a global, it has a wider accessibility. Okay, so once the function has done its execution, it will be popped out of the code execution phase, and then get city state, this function will also get popped out, and we have something as a console, like we will have a console box like this one. Okay, so after execution of, once the execution is done, the result you can see in your console. So the browser will not wait for all the function to get executed and then it will return the value to the console. So right now if you see this name, when the javascript will start executing the first line, it will be creating a memory creation and memory execution. Okay, and once the value is assigned to the name and you are doing a console.log, I mean you can, if you have written here console.log and name, all right, if you have written something like this, so once actual value is assigned to this variable, and when the program will come to this line, it will just print here geeks. It will print here. Okay, it will print, or I would say it will output this variable. Now it will come to this function which is a get city name, and then it will come here and all the execution, memory creation and code execution phase will happen, and it will see the variable and it will initialize the variable with initial value as undefined, and then the actual thing will go into your code execution phase, and then we will assign the actual value to this variable and it will print out. So here if you see, after this it will print this one, and after that it will print the state name. So this is how you will get the output, the three output you can get. And if I enlarge my screen, if I show you, and if I go to the one, so you can see Geeks Bhopal and MP, and here Geeks Bhopal and MP, the same result it will display. So this is all about the function behaves when you execute. Okay, so the takeaway, okay, before the takeaway I would be mentioning, now you have executed everything here, and now this is a global execution context. So now once a JavaScript program has finished running everything, and it will see like, hey, we don't have anything to execute now, then it will say like, just remove this global execution context as well, because you are done with your work and now you don't need anything. So the whole execution context will be removed, something like this, and you will be left with nothing and it will be completely blank and you will get this result. So this is how the JavaScript program or the function works behind the scene. Now this is everything about the theory. Now let me show you with the practical or the demo. This is I have written a small snippet of code. I'm just adding a debugger here. Okay, and you know what the debugger does? If you are not aware of what debugger does, it I would say like it apply a brake to a function execution, just like a car. Your car is running, and when you apply a brake, your car will get slow. It will not completely stop, but it will get slow down. So the debugger does the same thing. When you add a debugger, so what it does, it will pause your function or your JavaScript program for a specific time until and unless you do not execute it manually. So now here the automatic execution will not happen. Now the manual execution will happen. So now I'll execute this function. So you can see debugger. It means now I have applied a brake. Now I came to the manual transmission mode. Nowadays, a car is coming with auto transmission and manual transmission. So you can think of now from the auto transmission, it changed to the manual transmission. Now you have to shift the gear and everything yourself. Okay, so what I was saying, you can see the debugger is at line number 2. I have variable name. I talked 2 to 3 things. I talked about global execution context. I talked about a local execution context, and even I talked about the memory creation and code execution. So if you see the name here, this name, let's try to find this name inside. See, this is a call stack. Okay, the anonymous, if you see this anonymous function, this is actually a global execution context get created, which get created automatically. So whenever you run your JavaScript program, just go to your sources, or just see your debugger, you will be able to see all these stuff, which is called a call stack, which is called a thread. And I mentioned JavaScript is a single threaded. So you see, there are one, two, three, four thread, but my current control is at main thread. Once the main thread is done its work, then this second thread will work, third thread will work, and fourth. So it's a single threaded, and it works sequentially. Okay. Now this is a call stack, and inside a call stack, our global execution context and local execution context is created. Also, with the name call stack, if you see the stack is there, and if you are aware of something or data structure, so we have learned about the stack and queue data structure. So this works on the logic of a stack data structure. Stack means last come first out, right? This is how it happens. We have a stack, something like this, and we have a stack, and you just push thing into the stack, like first, second, third. So this, if this is the last you have pushed, so last came and first out, so whatever comes to the last, it will go first, which is a LIFO, last in first out. All right. Okay, coming back to our debugger. So if I want to see this variable value currently name, so where I can find this variable value, this is a scope, inside the scope, which is a global scope. If I expand this global scope, and let me just search the name. All right, you see this name is Geeks4Geeks, it's coming. Okay, initially it should be undefined as per the theory which I have demoed. So it should be undefined, but why it is showing name Geeks4Geeks, let me run and show you. So it seems like it already have executed. All right, let me execute it one more time, and my debugger is here, and let's see name. Okay, so the name is saying Geeks4Geeks. You know why? Initially it should be undefined, because we are initializing our memory creation phase. During the memory creation phase, the value should always be undefined, right? But why it is coming Geeks4Geeks? Any idea? If no, I'll let you know. But let's see what about other function. I said like the other function, the structure of the function will get copied. So let's find get city name. So let me search for get city name and see like what it is there. So see, the get city name, the actual function structure is copied. This is what I said, right? Get city name, the whole function structure is copied. The whole code is copied here. And in get state name, whole code is copied. But why it is not happening for this name, which is called a var? It should be initialized as undefined initially. But why it is not doing that? I'll show you. But let's move to the next line, which is this var. Now I came to this. var, and let's see the name here again. It should not change and it should be Geeks for Geeks only. Bear with me, like looks like the system is slow. And I'm just searching for the n because the variable name is n. Okay, so it is still Geeks for Geeks. All right, just keep this in mind, like it is Geeks for Geeks for now, but it should be initialized to undefined. All right, let me go to this function. The debugger will come to this function and get city name. And if the control will come to this function get city name, it will see, it will search like, hey, whether get city name is there in our code or not. It will find like, hey, we have a get city name. Then it will jump to this. So if you see here, now if you see the initial value of this city is undefined. Now let me just collapse the global. Now see, first of all, if you see my cursor in a call stack, we have this get city name, which is a local execution context. The anonymous is a global execution context, and the get city name, when this function is executed, so a local execution context is created. Okay, so local execution context is created, and even if you see the scope, if I'll just collapse it, there are two scope, which is a local scope and a global scope. As I mentioned, get city name belongs to your local execution context or simply a execution context. So if you expand this, you see city, actually my debugger is at line number 12 and initially it should be Bhopal, like as per the logic. If you were seeing for happening for the name was printing Geeks for Geeks, but this is not printing the Bhopal. It should be Bhopal, but it is not. It is printing undefined. Why? Because at this point of time, memory is created, and inside memory, the variable called city is inserted, and the default value or the initial value which is given to this city is undefined. So this is the initial value assigned to this variable city during a memory creation phase, which is undefined. Okay. Now let me go to line number 13, putting the debugger and execute this. Now see, the city name, if you see my cursor here, now the city name has changed to Bhopal, from undefined to Bhopal. Now what happened? This code is executed. It means it went to the execution phase. And once the execution phase started executing, it saw like, hey, we have the city, we have to console out the city, and we have the variable city as assigned as a Bhopal. So let's initialize this city to the actual variable here. And now the city got initialized as Bhopal, and previously it was undefined, right? So this is how now get city name is working. And I said you, once the function is done its execution, it will be popped out from the call stack. So see, right now it is inside the call stack, if you see. And as I said, once this is done working, I mean it's done its execution, it will be removed from the call stack. Because once it will remove from the call stack, then it will give chance to another function to get inserted in the call stack and do the work. So okay, let's see. I'm now putting my debugger, I'm just removing my debugger from everywhere and putting my debugger at get city name, because line number 7 got executed. So if I hit this debugger, and now my control came to line number 8, and now you see the call stack. Now the call stack, from the call stack, the local execution context previously, which was city name, get city name, it was there, right? Now it got removed, I mean the popped up. Okay, so now my call stack again has a global execution context. Now my control came to get city state, and it will see like, hey, do we have any function called get city state throughout the program? And it will see like, hey, I do have. So let me put a debugger here, line number 18, and let me show you. I'm executing my debugger. Let's see. Once I'll start my debugger, in call stack, get city state will get stored, or will it will get pushed, because it's a stack. So now stack we operate two things, push or pop operation. Okay, I'm hitting my debugger. See, get city state came inside the call stack. See how beautiful JavaScript works. So JavaScript is really beautiful, and you can understand everything, I mean, step by step, and it's really very easy if you understand the logic and the basics. So yeah, see, in a call stack, now get city state came. So this got added or pushed. I would say pushed, not added, because since we are talking about a stack, and a stack is based on the data structure which operate on operation called push and pop. So better to say use a word push. So now a local execution context is created and it is pushed inside a call stack, which is a get city name. Okay. And again, if you see my right side, the variable state, the variable name is state and it is MP, but it is undefined. It's weird, right? Why weird? Because initially for my var name GeeksforGeeks, it was printing the GeeksforGeeks, but for everything which is in my function, I mean local, it is printing undefined. Either I might have explained wrong, or something is happening wrong inside the JavaScript, right? I mean, two things can happen. Either I might have explained wrong in the initial, or something is happening wrong here, right? No, both of the things are correct at their own place. Okay. One thing for you to do a research, why the name is coming as a Geeks for Geeks when we are executing this program instead of undefined. I'll give you a hint. This is a intentional I wrote. Okay, fine. Now let's come to our function. So get city state, and we have the variable called state, and state is undefined. And if you go to line number 19, if I execute, it will initialize the value MP, this one. And now you got the variable. And if you see the console also here, see, currently Geeks for Geeks is printed and Bhopal is printed, but still MP is not printed, because I have applied brake on my car and I'm doing a manual transmission. So if I'm doing a manual transmission, I have executed this function, I have executed this variable, but I have not executed this function, right? Because this function is still in progress, because I have applied a debugger here. So until now, we have got only two results, which is Geeks for Geeks, which is coming from the variable name, and this Bhopal, which is coming from this function get city name. Okay. Third would be MP. But why it is not displaying? Because still my function is in the execution phase. I mean, this is still executing. Okay. So now the state is MP. Now if I hit a debugger here, I have clicked on the debugger. See, I clicked on the debugger, it printed MP. It means now the code execution is done. Fine. So now the JavaScript has done with the code execution, or I would say the complete thread execution. The complete thread is executed, but still if you see, I don't have my debugger there. I mean, this is a breakpoint I just added, so this can be removed, but debugger is vanished, right? This breakpoint is there because I just added, but no debugger. Now if you see the call stack is empty, right? The call stack is completely empty. It means the call stack, even it don't have a global execution context, which I mentioned. Whenever a JavaScript thread or a program runs, the initial execution context which creates is a global execution context, which is a anonymous, which acts as an anonymous function. And if you have given a keen eye to the global execution context, it was showing anonymous function. If you have not seen it with a eagle eye, I would say once the session will get over, just rewind and see on this point that was showing a anonymous function. So anonymous function is something which need not to get executed manually, it will automatically get executed, and hence the global execution context behave the same. So this is all about a global execution context, local execution context. It got finished, and now the call stack is completely empty, and you got this result. Everything fine. Hope you have got something to learn from this. I'll take a pause. I mean, I'll just stop. sh- Fine. I think I can stop sharing my screen and just to give a overall of a summary. And I have 9 minutes, so I'll try to cover event loop. But to be honest, event loop itself takes more than 1 hour to complete, and it is really a very good, interesting thing, and is a heavy knowledge loaded stuff. So I think I can explain in this amount of time. I can give you a overall, uh, I would say, brief introduction of event loop, so that I can create your base and I can prepare your mind, like if you study a event loop, what you can expect. But before going to the event loop, let me summarize what we have learned here. And I would say, or I would request you, once this session is over, just try to, I mean, run this code and see how the things are working. Because everyone, believe me, everyone knows to write a code, but there are very few who knows actually to write a good quality of code. And if you are targeting for a product company, I bet you, if you know to write a code, this will not help you. If you know to write a quality code, that will help you. And I'm saying you based on my experience. Okay. So we have seen a global execution context, we have seen a local execution context, we have a small intro of call stack. I have not covered because it's a part of a event loop. But the overall takeaway from this session would be to understand, whenever you run a JavaScript program, what happens behind the scene. So when a program is run, first of all, memory creation phase is created, and then code execution phase is created. In memory execution phase, everything everything, all the variable and the function will be initialized with the default value. And just to a note, this is a tricky interview question. Interviewer can ask you, like, why the variable is initialized with undefined but a function is initialized with the function structure. If you have seen, the variable initial value is undefined, but the function takes the whole copy, or the whole, I would say, the whole code, function code is get initialized. Why this happens? Why not? I mean, the function should also be initialized as undefined, but why the function code is copied during a memory creation phase, but only the variable? So just for your information, variable is initialized as undefined and function is initialized as the whole function copy. If you really want to understand, I would say, like, explore into a Google. If, I mean, search on a Google. If you don't know the answer or you are not getting a satisfactory answer, put into the comment. Any one of us will try to get you and let you know how this works. And I mean, the why the function is not initialized with undefined. Okay. So if you have understood this session completely, so I would say, after going from this session, you will have at least a basic understanding. Or if someone will ask you, like, how JavaScript program works behind the scene, I bet at least you would be able to say two things, at least two things. I think you will be able to say, like, okay, whenever a function execute, a memory creation phase is done, I mean created, and a code execution phase is created. Two phase happens. There are two phase which happens when a code is run. So I think this is one of the basic which you can take away from here, and more you can see how it happened. I would say, like, you can rewind this session and you can see line by line what happens. One homework for you: as I said, variable is initialized with undefined, but why it was showing Geeks for the variable. One tip I would say, I would like to give you a hint. The variable which I declared was on the global scope. If you see, this is a global variable. Just don't concentrate on this var. I can even give it as a let as well. Like even it can be let, it can be const. Doesn't matter. If you really want to dig deeper, you can just change this variable and see what works. So just a hint, this is onto a global scope, but this is into a local scope. Okay. So this was just, oh, sorry. I think I have not shared my screen. Let me share my screen. What actually I was trying to say. So initially this variable has a global scope, and this variable, this city variable, has a local scope. Okay, so you will say like, why where I can use let. So okay, you can try using a let, you can try using a const, and just tell me, are you getting the same value like geeks for geeks even if you are changing? So one hint, this is a global scope and this is a local scope. So this can be the reason, but yeah, I'll this is a homework for you, and just try to find it out why it is happening. So yeah, this is all about how JavaScript program works behind the scene. Now coming to the event loop, I'll just take 5 minutes, not more than that. I'll just take a 5 minute to explain a theoretical part of event loop, and you really, if you like the theory, you can ask us. We can create schedule one more session, and it would be completely focused on event loop. I thought of covering both of the stuff, but knowing the fact it would be unfair to start the event loop at this point, because it's knowledge heavy stuff, and these are the things getting asked in the interview. So I would like to give a quality and a proper time to explain the event loop. But if someone asks you event loop, or if someone asks you what is a event loop, okay, so the basic answer what you should give, or you would say, like, event loop is responsible for executing the code, collecting the processing events, and executing the queued subtask. I know this is very, very much technical definition. So just to mold this definition, you can think event loop as a supervisor. I would say event management, or you can think as the event manager. Like, what is the role of the event manager? Lot of request comes to the event manager, like they organize lots of events. So lots of request comes to the event manager, like, hey, I want to organize this event at 5 p.m., I want to organize this event at 6 p.m., and all those. So event manager takes all the request, and it processes the request, and it keeps watching whether the request is coming or not. If the request is coming, it will keep taking the request, and it will keep executing the request. This is the work of actual event manager. Just like event loop is also a event manager, it keeps checking for the event, and it keeps executing for the event. So events are the actions which is getting executed in a JavaScript engine. Okay, so like I have executed these two functions. So all these functions which I have shown you in a demo, that's are known as events. So whenever a event is executed, the event loop come into the picture. It supervises the event, and it keeps executing the events. So this is the event loop, and I can explain more about the event loop. And but just for your information, event loop executes inside a browser engine, which is a JavaScript engine, and the JavaScript engine is inside the browser. So think browser as a whole container. Inside a whole container, there is another container which is a JavaScript engine, and inside a JavaScript engine, the event loop stays, and it executes everything. So right now, what I have demoed you, I mean the function like memory creation, everything, these all are executed inside the event loop, which I have not shown you. So event loop take care of everything which happens. So yeah, this is the very basic definition of event loop. And what takeaway you can have from the event loop is it acts as a event manager. It keeps managing the events which is coming. And we have used the word loop. Like if you think from the English grammar perspective, what is a loop? Even you might have used do loop, while loop, for loop. So loop keeps executing the program until the condition is satisfied. So just like a event loop will keep executing the events until and unless it is getting the event, like we are doing while I is equals to 10, I less than 10, and keeps executing. So until I is less than 10, it will keep executing the value. So likewise event loop will keep executing the value until and unless it is getting the value. So this is about the event loop. So I think I'm good at this point of time in explaining both of the topic. But yeah, I'm really sorry I have not taken for the event loop because it takes more time. So better in the next session we will take care. So if you have any questions, you can put in a comment section. I will stay another for another 1 minute, and meanwhile I'm going through the comment and I'll see if you have anything for me. Any technical question, non-technical question, anything you can ask me. And also please do comment what thing you have understood throughout this session, and what you have not understood, or what uh, confusion you have still. Okay, from Jay Shah, he's asking if we have to apply for React JS developer, then company has front-end engineer role or any. Yes, I mean, to this question, every company have a specific role to them. If you know React, obviously most of the company used to hire for the React developer, a Node developer, and everything. But currently, most of the companies are hiring for React, and React is of good demand in the market. So yeah. And before doing that, I would say, like, if you have liked this webinar and if you want to enroll in the course which I'm taking from the 10th September, which would be a full stack development course where we would be learning HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Node.js, and basics of the JavaScript. I always focus on the basics of JavaScript, because if you know JavaScript, you can learn anything, you can crack any of the front end engineering interview question in the product company, service company, whatsoever. But mostly people focus on the product company. So that is the thing. I mean, my course would be very much dedicated to get crack the product company. So you can use a code which is live 20 off, and you will get a 2000 offer on the course if you enroll. And we'll have a very fun learning the course, and a lot of things we would be discussing and solving online and through the demo. So yeah. So hope, Jay, I have answered your question. So I mean, React is in a great demand, and for next couple of 2 to 3 year, as per my experience, I think it will be boosting until and unless we don't get any other framework. So yeah. So if anyone don't have any comments or question, okay, can we go in FANG company by this course? Okay, this is a nice question. I would say treat don't treat this as a course, treat this as a base, because this course will provide you a base to crack any of the interview. So cracking a interview does not need you know everything. What it need, you know the basic, and you know how to solve a interview questions. If you know how to solve an interview question with some optimization, with some performance, and with a good code quality, you can go to any of the FANG company. It's not about any FANG company, any product company. So FANG company don't looks like you are able to solve code. They also see the code quality. They see how well you approach a code, like what is your thought process. They don't see like you have written the code and your code is working. If this is the case, then everyone would be in the product company. They see a lot of stuff. So yep. So I think I'm done from my side. And if Jolly, if you want to come online and take
Yeah,
this
okay.
I mean closing session.
Thanks, Push, for the great session. Give me a second. Yeah, hello. So, anyone who is in doubt, they can fill the form available in chat box or in comment section. So, our team will connect them. Okay, thanks, Push, and thanks, audience, to join this session. And there is one more question in our chat box. Let's take that one also.
Okay,
Is
what
design
is
process understanding a good knowledge giving a problem statement?
is design process understanding a good knowledge given a problem statement? I think I'm little bit not sure what is being asked, but what I can understand from this question is like JR is asking about a system design, basically a system design, high level design and low level design. So yes, if you have a basic understanding, I don't say like you just have to be very expert in a system design, because system design is a kind of open ended question and nobody is perfect in the system design interview. Something you will be doing here and there. So you must be aware how actually the system works. Even if you give something wrong answer, that is not going to make any difference, because it's a open ended kind of a discussion, a system design. What you need to know, a basic how the system works. If you know this, you are good to crack any system design interview, even if you give some flaky answer. But yes, your answer must have a logic.
Okay, this one is the last question for our webinar from pre-hitters.
uh, how I
How I
build
build, yeah,
DSA visualizer website using JS. So I think if you are talking about the visualizer, and if I'm getting your question correctly, a DCA visualizer. So you can use a React, but React itself is not sufficient, because you need lots of backend stuff there as well. So but yes, for a front end, I mean only for a front end you can use a React, but I mean that will not suffice. You need a backend stuff as well, like you need a database as well, you need some visualization library as well, just to add a visualization effect. But answer to this question, if you want, you can create using a React, the UI part. Rest of the part you need other tech stack. Yep. I think you are on mute, Jolly. Your voice is not audible.
okay, okay, sorry.
Yep. No
So
problems.
let's connect on 10th of September during your sessions. Thanks for the wonderful session for today. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
So
Thank you all.
thanks
See you
everyone.
soon.